Geno Yoweri Kaguta Museveni giwunye anti abazungu babano abamuguddeko olutalo bagamba bakoye kigavumenti kye Uganda zibiri bannayuganda bafa battibwa buli olukedde akati nno bakoye okulaba bannayuganda nga babonaabona.
A lot about the momentum is picking up again because of the documentary, but also because of the resilience of the Ugandan comrades. They have not surrendered, they have continued, even against all odds, even in moments of burnout or frustration or exhaustion. The main thing that has continued is you have not given up. And this means you are a true Spartan, you have a Spartan mentality. As you know, I have a tattoo on my shoulder that says Spartan law, and it stands for no retreat, no surrender. I believe also this is one of the most powerful elements of martyrs. Many of our comrades have died, have been killed by the regime, but as long as we remember them on a daily basis, for example, with lighting a candle, as long as we remember them, we cannot give up, because we will always have this vigor to not let their death be in vain. And I think in that case, always in a revolution, those that are killed, actually, they empower us to be resilient, to push a little bit further, to continue and to find the solution. And therefore, I think also this year is going to be a very interesting year. That might be a new 2020. I'm still a bit sick, so I might be coughing, but hope you don't mind. This year, it has some particular opportunity, because also when we look at the larger scheme of things, 2026 will be the new election time. And of course, the past years, we have seen Project Muhuzi being prepped, being tried. Museveni, of course, his main tool is not oppression, his main tool is deception. His main tool is to deceive the people, and then the people themselves, they let themselves be diverted. They let themselves be deceived instead of doing the correct things to liberate themselves. So deception is his main weapon that he's using to oppress the people. And deception is the main power of dictatorships in most cases. Only when people are opening their eyes, they are awakened, they are no longer deceived, only then he needs to use the physical oppression. The mental slavery, the mental oppression is way more powerful, and at the moment, way more effective in the Ugandan case. Fortunately, we have been fighting for a long time. So most Ugandans, they are awakened, but it's mainly the effect of fear or hopelessness. They don't see a hopeful alternative yet in place. They don't know what will happen after we remove Museveni. For example, do we create a new Sudan, where even though we have a revolution, afterwards it's followed by a civil war? So this lack of clarity and lack of alternative, it's still stopping a lot of Ugandans to rise up. And I think today we will delve into what can combat that lack of certainty or that lack of alternative. We will talk about how to organize parallel institutions. So what is the idea of a parallel institution? I think the clearest example is, for example, in medieval times, when you had in a kingdom, the king, of course, was trusted and known by other people, but the very essential aspect of this kingdom was the heir to the throne. Because without the heir, when the king will die, there will be chaos. So the heir was always very essential. People had to know exactly who's going to be the second in command the moment the king dies. Because what then happened when the king died, they could just say, the king is dead, long live the king. Because exactly the second the king died, there was a replacement. There was an alternative individual able to replace the former. So that is more individual based. But the concept is the same for revolutions. What we have seen in many African revolutions is that the king is dead, so the dictator was dethroned, they fell, but there was no long live the king. It was not yet directly replaced. The second the dictator fell, there was nothing. There was a power vacuum. There was an empty spot of anarchy or chaos. And what often happens in those moments is that the most organized group takes over. So sometimes it's the Muslim Brotherhood, sometimes it's the army. Often it's the army because they are very organized. It's essential for combat troops or fighters to be very organized, because through organization, you are most effective in the use of your resources. When you're not so organized, you move slowly, you cannot direct your forces to opportunities as soon as possible. You cannot take the initiative very directly. And that's why it's essential for movements or armies to be as organized as possible. And the main reason when you study revolutionaries like Frantz Fanon, Nkrumah, Steve Biko, Nelson Mandela, one of their main focus points was how to organize their movement. So today we will talk about how can we become even more organized. We have seen multiple waves of opposition in Uganda. Let's assume it started with DP and the Young Democrats, and out of it, FDC came. And after decades of resistance by FDC, we now have NUP and the People Power Movement. They're at the moment the third generation of opposition in Uganda. And how can we ensure that we learn the lessons from those that came before us, that we learn from elders like Kizza Besigye and know how to integrate the lessons, and most importantly, how can we improve? Because Museveni is using the same blueprint. He has mastered the game of rigging elections. For the past 20 years, he has done something over and over and over again. They're very similar. When you deeply analyze all the elections, you see that a very similar path of rigging the elections have been followed. So of course, sometimes it's the deception. He does it a little bit different to deceive the opponent, but always there are these moles, there's this distrust, the spies in different, destructing the narrative of the opponent, blackmailing, bribing, corruption. We see so many things happening in the blueprint of how dictatorships steal the elections, and Museveni might be the most able election stealer of Africa. So therefore, I'm afraid that if we go again for another election, 2026, maybe we come a bit closer again to victory, maybe we have the best approach ever, but I remain pessimistic about our options when we again go for election, because I've also seen that just a general election is one thing. The replacement of the dictator Museveni for the president elected by the people, Bobi Wine, but this whole system of the demigods, of the members of parliament. Like when you study medieval Europe, you have a king and you have the medieval lords. And below the medieval lords, they're living like, they have very luxurious lives, they live in castles. Below them, there's the majority of the people that are just the peasants working on agriculture, working on the lands. When I look to the system of Uganda, I see a similar thing. For most Ugandans, the only way to truly escape the poverty, the survival mindset, the psychology of the oppressed, is to become a member of parliament. But what happens when members of parliament get power? In a lot of cases, fortunately not all, we also, of course, have honest MPs that stay true to the fight for the people. But the majority of members of parliament, what happens when they become a member of parliament, after being in opposition for a very long time, they become part of the system. They suddenly, from poverty, they're elevated to a luxurious lifestyle, comparable to those that are millionaires in the Western world. They travel to all countries, they have good lives. In a sense, they start eating themselves. And when you start eating, you start getting used to the system. It's very difficult to want to abolish the system. But I believe as long as the system keeps on expanding, it's not by accident that every election more and more MP positions are created. It's to invite more of the growing populations into the system and to actually lure or deceive. It's like a bait. They bait the brilliant, most talented, most gifted Ugandans with a position as a member of parliament. In a sense, they become a demigod. They become part of the nobility. And even though there might be a critical part of the nobility, the system remains very similar to how it has been for a long period. So if we want true transformation, I believe we also have to think about how is the new Uganda going to look like? And I heard a lot of opposition members, activists, politicians talking about the system of member of parliaments, that maybe there's a lot of opportunity to create. So how can we then create it? There's this essence of parallel institutions. And parallel institutions is that at the moment from the struggle itself, so not after the victory, but before the victory. So while you're still fighting, you build an alternative social, political, economic structure. So the moment that Museveni falls, we have something in place directly the same second to replace the old system with the new system. Why is this important for peaceful revolutions? We have to realize what is the most important group in peaceful revolutions is the armed troops. It's police, army, and secret service. And they are loyal to the state. If they have to choose, they're loyal to order. If they have to choose to fight for order or for chaos, so if we don't have any alternative, we say we want to take down Museveni, we take him down, but we have nothing organized in place, they would face to go from order to chaos. And they are very organized, law-abiding citizens, so they want, of course, they prefer order over chaos. What about the general population? What is the main consideration of the general population? It's to the survival of their families, the well-being of their children, the ability to keep working, to maintain their jobs. So just the general things that are needed for the major part of the population, they would prefer to stay with order than chaos. So therefore, they would likely keep supporting the devil they know than the uncertainty that come. Like the main fear of humanity is fear of the unknown. When children are small, they are fear of the dark because they don't know what's inside the darkness. So if we have nothing, if there's uncertainty what will follow after the victory, people will be hesitant to join. However, something very interesting happens when that clarity is in place. For example, in Libya, against Gaddafi, we saw that the rebels organized themselves into an alternative state from the beginning. And what we saw is that just by this alternative state, suddenly all colonial countries like UK, French, they spent millions on the rebels directly. They said, okay, from now on, we're not loyal to Gaddafi anymore, we're loyal to the rebel state. Or this is not the case because they were rebels, but this is the case because they organized a parallel institution. So this means that the power from a parallel institution, it means that suddenly you can attract external support. You can say to police, military, and the secret service, you don't have to go into chaos. You can just switch from the current system, the current government, the current dictator, to our new system. So maybe how this looks in practice is that actually People Power Movement or Noop or Bobby Wine, the elected president of the people, that they launch a new state of Uganda, a new Uganda. Like the Netherlands, when they declared independence from Spain, they said we create a new state. And by doing this, you have something that creates that certainty. So how to build these parallel institutions, how to think about it, we need to create it already during the struggle, not after it. I think it's something important to think, to keep in mind what will be important. One moment, I will take some water. So what currently happens? We just saw it by the video before it. At the moment, economy is built for top-down enrichment. It's the few that benefit, not the many. So for our economic system, we need a system that benefits the many instead of the few. What about society? At the moment, we have a society that divides the people, that divides Karamoja and Buganda, that makes sure that the tribal ethnicities are highlighted, that the tribe of Museveni himself is empowered, that there is this social tension, this lack of social cohesion. So a new state, like Sankara did, needs to create a unity of society, needs to find ways how to unite the tribal differences, to overcome the ethnic walls between them, to create a national identity of Ugandans. What about the political aspect? Instead of control from above, we need freedom from below. We need to find how can we empower the people? How can we help them in their pursuit of happiness, in their pursuit of following their dreams? How can we, for Uganda, there are a lot of entrepreneurs. At the moment, they're taxed three times. In other countries, they are taxed in all sorts of ventures. Instead of they are given cheap loans to start their very brilliant ideas. So in all sorts of ways at the moment, Ugandans are divided, they are made dependent, and they're deceived. If we want to truly build that parallel institution, an alternative Uganda, we have to create a vision, an inspirational vision of that alternative future of the parallel institutions that does the exact opposite. So what does it then have to do? It has to unite Ugandans, it has have to make them self-reliant, and it has to awaken them always, inform them as much as possible. So this will be the start of my talk. Well, I'll give I will take some water and we cover a bit from the speaking, then I continue with the second part. So for now, maybe Dorcas, we give the floor to some questions.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's really very good to hear from you. And of course, this is very timely because we need to get rid of the dictator. However, organization is key. It's important. If we're not organized, how are we going to oust that dictator? So thank you so much for that. Yes, Comrade Joseph, please do come in, and then we'll give Kato, you've got hands. Yes, and then Comrade Joseph, Mr. Kato, bear with me seconds. Comrade Joseph, I see your mic was already unmuted. Do come in, and then we have you take a few questions. Thank you, or submissions.
Thank you, Dr. Eric, for that wonderful analysis. Great to see you. Sorry about your sickness. Hopefully you recover soon. Thank you so much. That was a good beginning to the new year in terms of new direction, new focus, and new thinking on how we go forward. I totally agree with you pretty much in everything you said. One, I don't even want to dwell on elections because the whole issue of elections is just a non-starter, given the history, and that's basically what you learned from. You said, how do we learn from the movements that came before us, the DP, the FDC, and others that have tried? There is no way you can win against Museveni via an election, and even said it himself that no mere piece of paper is going to move in power. So that is a non-starter. So then you mentioned something about MPs becoming part of the system. Museveni's really been excellent at this. As I said, he gerrymanders before every election. I mean, actually, he didn't do it as much, I think, in the last election, but for many elections prior, before each election, you create new districts. That is kind of an indirect patronage system. That's how he buys people and expands his majority in parliament. And as you know now, there is a movement or talk of having MPs elect the next president, just like in the parliamentary system, so that, you know, if the elections are becoming too messy and giving him a lot of bad press internationally, he can use his MPs who are getting all these benefits to perpetuate him or his son into power. So what does that mean? As I said, we as Ugandans, as people who love change, we have to wake up and say, you know what, we have to stop these shenanigans. I mean, obviously, as I said, it's not easy, but we cannot afford to continue waiting because Museveni is very good, as I said, it's very good at rigging elections, though, perpetuating himself in power. So we need to really intensify our efforts to counter him. So that was very good. Now, you talked about the parallel institutions, how we need to create parallel institutions during the struggle before the actual taking power, and that is very true, because actually that's what Museveni did. If anyone studied Museveni, that's exactly what he did. Before he took power, from the 80s, he created this called RC system, the Resistance Council movement. You know, he went to the villages and, you know, he created this, so, you know, governance, local councils, and actually the best of local traditional systems, by the way, and a lot of you guys don't know that. What Museveni created was not new, but he kind of knew how people thought, what they could relate to, and created this local council system and kind of gave him a bit of legitimacy, a sense of, you know, we have a system that we can, you know, build upon once the regime at the time is gone. And so that is right. We need to think of how do we get the people more involved to say that, hey, we're going to have a voice, we have a stake in this, and if the government at the top or the regime is gone, we have a system that can sustain us. And luckily for NUP or the People Power Movement, it has a lot of support countrywide. And I don't know exactly what, you know, it can really build upon that support regionally and find ways, hopefully, of creating that parallel system. It's a matter of, as I said, thinking very clearly, hard, look at some of the examples, how did Museveni do it, how, you know, what the different, because again, each region is different, and each region has its own mechanisms. How do we build upon this to create local systems which get people bought into, you know, the change that we want to bring, and empowers them from below, as I said, empowering the people from below. That is very, very, very important. So pretty much, that's what I want to say. Thank you so much, Eric. That was excellent analysis, and we hope that, you know, I'm glad that you have connections and you talk to the president and others, that these ideas, you kind of share them with them. And with that, I think I see there's some hands. Dorcas, I'm gonna start taking some hands. You empowered me to take some hands. And I see Mr.
Excellent.
Yes, right?
Before you go on, I would love to to respond to some of the things you're saying.
Right.
Thank you again for, and of course, amazing that we're talking to each other again. We go back so long now, and also the physical thing, the physical times we meet at conferences, or just how we walked at YouVote. Amazing experience in the struggle so far, and just the fact that we're still learning, I think, is powerful. The experience, when we utilize it well, we keep learning. In the end, we will become more effective, and that gives me a lot of hope that one day we will definitely achieve what we have been fighting for now for many, many years, or even decades. So just us continuing to learn and to educate ourselves, it's extremely powerful. About election. So one of the things I observed during last election, the more we focused on election, because of course that was our main strategy in a sense, the more powerless I think we become, the more brutal, the more shameless the police became in the oppression. So because what do you do with elections? In a sense, you create hopeful dependency. I remember I was giving a lecture at the Chambogo University with some local activists, and we were talking about the students asked, why do we continue this path? And we told a story about what do Ugandans do again and again and again. Every time there's an election, they think this time our new leaders, they can save us, they can solve our issues. So the leaders, they make promises, they say we have bad leaders, but we can do it better than the last time. So there's always the same system, same thing happening, blaming the old leaders, promising new policies or new things to happen. But what happens every time after an election, especially member of parliament elections, we have observed this. Suddenly, after some time, the new leaders, they forget their promises, and then the people, they say, okay, this time we made a mistake, but next time we will vote for real good leaders. So you have this eternal, hopeful dependency of others to solve your problems, instead of that you yourself take ownership and you take action by yourself as a community. You become independent of leaders. And actually, this is so powerful. This is bottom-up creation. So this brings me to the next point. Indeed, Museveni did this very well, parallel institution, and therefore so many believe that Museveni was a different kind of revolutionary. The local resistance councils created by the NRA, and of course they made them vigilant against attacks from the army. They did things to empower them, to improve the agricultural output. All these aspects of the bottom-up empowerment, it was the main legitimacy of the revolution of Museveni. However, then when he got power, 1986, what we saw was directly from that moment, there was a reversal. Instead of bottom-up empowerment, we saw that he started to switch to top-down control. So this is also what we always have to be vigilant for in our own group, in NOOP, or People Power Movement. We should always, that's the essence of democracy, that the bottom-up, they chain those in power. So there's this dynamic between those below and those at the top always. So it's always important for us to remain more educated, to remain critical, to find this balance between fighting together, but still ensuring that the power of the people remains there. Because in the end, it's not Bobby that's powerful, it's you and me and Dorcas and everybody that are delegating our power to Bobby because we believe in him, but it's the power that resides within ourselves, so within the people. And the more people understand this, the sooner we can convince them to take away the power from Museveni. Because the only way why Museveni is powerful is because people believe that there is power residing at Museveni, while in reality it resides with them. If we awaken that illusion, actually tomorrow we can have a free Uganda, because it can switch so instantly, because it's only based on an illusion, not on a reality. So I think that's again powerful. If we learn that lesson from Museveni, if we now create new local resistance councils this year, all year, we start building this parallel institutions bottom up in the villages, in the cities. I think especially the villages will be powerful because it's more difficult to control. That by itself will create a more powerful revolutionary year than every year before, because we let people taste how power feels like when they truly have this power. And we help them to solve their own issues, to, I don't know, what is the biggest problem? Often it's food or security. So how can we then help them to solve those issues? If they start to experience they can solve their issues by themselves, they will become more confident, more organized, more believing that actually they can do it themselves instead of this dictator. Instead of Pre-Amba Museveni, save us, help us, they can do it themselves. Then the other part, why is this so powerful? As you know, I'm a big fan of Sun Tzu. The Art of War is my military Bible. And what he's saying, and other military geniuses are saying as well, defense is stronger than the offense. So what happens when we just focus a lot on building parallel institutions? We don't even have to attack the current system. We can just build an alternative system. And instead of attacking the old system, we just have to defend the increasingly more powerful old system. And because we don't have to attack, we only have to defend, we are inherently stronger in a military sense. So even more powerful than trying to or do protest, trying to do strikes. I start to believe that actually the most powerful is if we start to build parallel institutions and that just defend that parallel institutions with strikes, with actions. So instead of trying to dethrone the old system, we build a new, more compelling system, and therefore more and more people, they convert to our side because we just have a better system. If we do it this way, we only have to defend instead of to attack. Thank you for the first questions.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna start taking hands, but just quick comment on what you just said, that Museveni built this bottom-up system, but then taking power started up, kind of like imposing from the top. And one other lesson there is that when Museveni started doing that, some people spoke up and say, hey, this guy is becoming something. But Museveni was so beloved by a lot of these people. They really trusted him. They're like, oh, no. He's a leader. You know, we have to listen to the leader. So guarding against this godlikeness of these revolutionary leaders, whereby, you know, you cannot even, you know, bring out facts that, you know, yeah, we need to have the voice of the people. You know, so we have to guard against this tendency of imposing stuff from the top and not listening enough to the people. And unfortunately, in Uganda's case, we've always had a big man mentality or big leader mentality, whereby the leader does not do any wrong. The leader becomes like a god. And if anyone, you know, if anyone speaks up against the leader, then that person is ostracized. That person is, you know, somehow, you know, should be shunned. So I think we need to guard against that. Really, you know, ensure that the people, the voice up, you know, bottom up, you know, the movement is empowered, and we demand democracy. We demand that people have a say in what happens, that the leaders listen to the people, and that the leaders are not imposing, because otherwise we're going to end up with exactly where a lot of revolutionary movements have ended up, whereby the former revolution leader becomes a new dictator because we gave him so much leeway, whereby whatever he said or she said went, you know, like you could not question anything. And once you allow that to go for some time, they become like, you know, they start feeling entitled to have their opinions imposed on. And then they have enablers who then say, hey, you know what, yeah, shut that person up because they're not doing, you know, like they're trying to retard progress or anything like that. So thank you so much for that. Now let me start taking hands. I see Mr. Kato had a hand up. Mr. Kato, can you please ask Mr. or comment or ask Mr. Eric question?
Well, I nearly forgot my question, my thought process, because Joseph, you are talking too much. So
oh, oh sorry, Kato.
I'll try to be as brief as possible, but thank you so much, Eric, again and Happy New Year, and to you, Joseph. And one of the things that you have already hinted about elections and the rest of it, but I will also ask two questions. One, is it to do with our colonial education system, that the white people came and they became superior, and everything they left to us, this is how it should be, and so we cannot defer. That's why I love Dorcas worships you by saying you professor, and you just ignore that. And for us, that is, the title is the big thing, and as a result, we have been having all this. Yeah, so anybody in like MP is a big person, you give him the due respect and everything. And two, if we this year there will be lots of elections. The whole world will be having elections, and of course the camera won't be showing in Uganda will not have any chance. What do we do in this circumstance? Do we press on to rise up, or we hold on until the next year so that the cameras can also focus on ourselves? So those are my few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kato. I promise I won't speak too much next time, Kato.
No, it's okay. I joke.
All right. Let me see. Next person is yeah.
Is it okay I first respond?
Yes.
Sure. Apologies, comrades. It's I forgot to mention this. It's at the top of the hour, 3 o'clock. Yes. We normally have just a moment of silence, and then we'll carry on. Apologies. Please, let's all mute and let's have a moment of silence. Acceptable. Why should Ugandans just die prematurely? It's okay for people. We all know that we'll die one day. Of course, we are not immortal, but why should people die just because there is no law in Uganda? And it has carried on for 37 years, ladies and gentlemen. So let us not be silent. Neutrality is not an option. Let us continue to speak about these injustices. Thank you so much for observing that moment of silence. I will hand over the mic to Professor. Thank you. I think Mr. Kato had given his submission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorcas, for the most important part, to use this memory of those that have sacrificed their blood. As there is this saying that freedom is not free, it always comes with a high cost, the highest cost of all, which is blood. So also, I think so essential when we gain victory, but already during the struggle, keeping the memories alive of those that have sacrificed their lives, so that us and our children can enjoy the new Uganda. They are, without them, we would have not been here at this moment. It might be ourselves that might have died instead. So just by taking this memory, this time to remember, I think it's essential to any revolution. And because we are doing it so on a weekly, consistent basis, it creates a very powerful basis for us, a moral strength that keeps us going. Okay, Kato, thank you for the amazing questions. So let me go to the second one first. The half of the world is going to be elections, but what is more intriguing than election? To me, it's revolution. So what would me make very happy, in a sense, as part of the people power movement, is when the resistance finally and resolutely accepts that elections, either at MP or national level, are going to benefit the dictator and not the struggle in itself. Imagine what happens when all our focus, when we just accept, we make a decision, we're not going to focus on election anymore, we're going to focus on revolution only, peaceful revolution, of course. I think just that acceptance, that it will focus our minds and our efforts and our preparation and our resources, everything towards revolution instead of election. So just that choice, I think, can be very powerful. Then this year, so how can we attract the cameras? There are two things that attract the attention of humanity at large: war, and war between people and the government. And what is revolution? Revolution is war between people and the government. What we're just doing is peaceful revolution. But if we actually have something different than ever before, I think Walk to Work 2011 came close. When we do such a thing, we will have more attention than any election. Of course, the United States with Trump, it's going to be very essential for also the Third World War, the fight between the West and the East. I expect it to explode very soon. So we also have to think, how can we navigate the Ugandan? So again, let's go to global politics for a moment. From my perspective, I'm in the Netherlands, so I'm part of the imperial of the Western Empire. Of course, the United States is the core of the power. Europe, they are the auxiliaries, the helpers of the United States. More and more, we see they becoming more hostile against Russia, Iran, and China. And even though they're not yet a formal axis, there is this possibility because of China with the intention of Taiwan, Iran influence with Israel, and then Russia and Ukraine. And all of them, they are hostile against the United States, which is the hegemonic power. So one by one, they will be defeated. But when they're united, which is, of course, the most strategic thing to do when you're fighting a war, it makes sense that they would unite. So I personally expect the Third World War is coming. Maybe soon, maybe this year, maybe within 5, maybe within 10. But I think also because of the Gaza genocide, the virus of violence, the virus of hate, suffering, of not ratio, but emotion and trauma and hostility and fear, it has overcome a threshold of no return, and therefore escalation between these forces. So what can we then do for Uganda? Because what's the difference between the East and the West? The West, there's still, of course, a lot of problems. but they're still democracies. I live in a free, I can say for certainty the Netherlands is a free country. And I experienced this also with my government. So the free, maybe there are some free nations, some less free, but against a Russia or a China, which I personally, from my perspective, don't see as free. So maybe it's democracies versus dictatorships. What then is going to be quite powerful when this big conflict is happening? The forces of freedom, I believe, even though they're colonial and all the things they have done to keep the system, I totally see it as well. It's essential in my book. But still, we can attract resources of the Western world to the struggle of the people, to the forces fighting for freedom. So if we're strategic, we can actually use this momentum to attract a lot of external support to our struggle. Bobby has done a lot of great work with the documentary. So he's already traveling around, making alliances, making networks. In the Western world, more and more people are starting to see our cause as legitimate. The thing is, we don't have an alternative yet. That's the main reason why we're still where we're here. If we this year focus our effort on not elections or diversion or things we have done business as usual, if this whole year we start focusing on organizing parallel institutions bottom up in Uganda itself, an alternative state that can replace the state of Museveni directly as Museveni falls, when we focus our efforts on building and organizing the alternative, suddenly I think it can suddenly make the difference in that 2024 we finally succeed with the revolution because of the global dynamics happening, and therefore creating more finances for those fighting for freedom. So in that aspect, I'm optimistic that actually this year it's very possible. I'm optimistic that if we are strategic, we do the right things, we do stop the things that don't work and we do the things that can work, it might be different. Your first question, the colonial education, the titles, indeed, I think it's likely colonial legacy in for example, the members of parliament, of course, very respected. And also within opposition politics, we see that instead of actual change or revolution, a lot of activists, they become satisfied with positions, or we see it in politics. It's more about the position than the actual policy or the actual change, the actual service you do for the people. It's more the being comfortable with a position, and that position by itself. So just by somebody being in a chair, therefore has all the power. I believe the original state of humans should actually be disobedience, and only our obedience can be earned by those that are trustworthy, they have integrity, moral status. So only I think that's also, I don't know, at the moment it's the other way around. People expect us to be obedient, and only in exceptions we are disobedient. I think it should be the other way around. We should always be disobedient, and only for those that earn our trust, we become obedient. So again, let's then turn to our president. I saw some comments already that we're lucky with Bobby. I totally agree. I think every human, they have dark sides and a light side. And when I bring it down, I think there are two elements: greed versus love. So and the dictator always, of course, tries to improve the aspect of greed with bribery, with political power, economic power. So greed is always our opponent. However, love, and I think especially the love Bobby has for his family, for his wife, for his fellow comrades. Like when you observe the documentary, there are moments that you see him crying out loud because he truly is pained by the loss of his friendship of the fellow activists. So I think those aspects, they show that Bobby chooses love over greed. And as long as we keep reinforcing within ourselves, within our leaders, that they choose for love and not for greed, we can get a new leader instead of Museveni. Because Museveni is pure greed in a sense, like many other dictators, but always remain that you are aware of this dynamic in the dark and the light side of humans, individual humans, of greed versus love. And by empowering love, we will always become more enlightened or inspirational, and therefore truly revolutionary. Thank you.
Docus?
Thank you so much, Professor Eric. Yes, let's take more hands. Mimi, actually, comrades, if honorable hands up, do give me heads up. Yes, we have Mimi, Godfrey. Ladies first. Let's have Sister Mimi. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, comrades, and thank you so much, Professor Eric, for, sacrificing your time, and especially for our country. I think you could have had many better things to do, but you sacrificing your time away from your family, away from whatever you do, we really appreciate. My question is two things. One of them, we are talking about organization. And then also you talked about alternative government. Many times I think we do have many guests that come, and there's an assumption that we understand. What is alternative government? What are the expectations of alternative government, and what are we supposed to do, especially in this revolution? What does the alternative government do? These are some of the things that we miss. Some few people might understand what it is, but what does the alternative government do? And how does it contribute to what we are doing in the struggle? The second thing is organization. For me, my stickler right now is the Constitution. I know most people say that, oh, the Constitution right now we have in Uganda we do not have a Constitution because it was created by, the current government. But I'm thinking in my sense, and going back to the organization, how do we understand that we need to organize ourselves before we get into the new Uganda? Because many times people are thinking that we are just going to first remove the dictator without preparing ourselves as to what government. First of all, we need to know what form of government we need. We need to know the Constitution. There has to be some, and that's where the alternative government comes in. There has to be some people behind the scenes working on these things, working on what kind of form of government, what kind of constitution. You have to work off something. We have to work off this Constitution and see what are the flaws. What are the flaws that we don't have the same repeat things that are happening now, happening again in the new Uganda. But if we are going to wait until the new Uganda comes, and then we start thinking of the Constitution, we start form of government, some of us, we are not even trained, but we want to be ministers. Are we preparing ourselves for this eventuality that is going to come when they call you to be a finance minister? Are you trained in that? So these things are the things that we are not thinking about, but we are just thinking of removing the dictator. But this is what I think, in my opinion, alternative government has to prepare all of us and prepare the struggle, prepare the soldiers. I received a document from one of the foot soldiers, and I was mesmerized the kind of things that we do. Like even elections, we are saying, we don't need elections, but what has this election, what are these MPs in parliament done? There's been an impact. So we can't just throw that out and say, we don't need elections, we don't, There's some, if we leave these people to, they'll go and get by the way, the son of the president is moving in schools and right now in the background, because these people are gonna turn 18 by the time and they're gonna vote. So if we have a parliament that is just filled out with just them, without an opposition, it's going to be so hard to fight from outside when there's nobody from the opposition in the parliament. So those are kind of prolonged, but those are my questions about organization, organizing ourselves before we get into the new Uganda, and understanding alternative government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi, so much for excellent, excellent questions. And I think, so indeed, to go into depth, how does it alternative government looks like? I think maybe for now, we can focus what should always be the principle of alternative government. And I think in that it comes self-reliance. So at the moment, there is this intent, the dictatorships, they want the people to be dependent, to be waiting for the government, to believe the government is their savior, their everything. They need the government for everything. But the alternative is that we help them to start solving local issues by themselves. For example, a village that they prepare the road by themselves, or when there is something missing with a house, that somehow the community can solve the issue by themselves. I found 3 focus points that helps me to divide the parts of self-reliance. The most important part is, do the people have enough food, or do they have enough money to eat? So economy, self-reliance economy, for me, it's the most important part to start focusing on how are we now dependent on the government? How can we start to organize ourselves to govern our economic issues at the local level? The second part is the people, so society. How can we ensure that within our village, we have this sense of Ubuntu, that we are able to work together, that we overcome tribal differences or political or religious differences. For example, there's this nice example of, it's called Action for Liberty and Economic Development. They are positioned in Ntebe. And when they come together, they have a meeting. They have members of all kinds of political and religious backgrounds. There are people of NRM, FDC, DP, many more. And what they do when they go inside that building, they say, we leave our political cloaks outside. So when they come together, they are no longer divided by religious or political lines. They're all Ugandans at an equal level. So whether it creates this national identity, this equality, and suddenly very beautiful agricultural projects. So for example, a farm was bought by members of NRM, of FDC. So ideological, they had differences, or NUP, but because when they came together, they said, we're all Ugandans. We don't mind about your political color. They solved these issues together because they brought the expertise. So also I'm becoming more and more tolerant and more friendly to NRM in a sense, because what do we want to do with the majority of NRM members? We want to convert them to our side. And also most NRM members, I believe, are also just wanting to take care of their families. They want to have a good life, and they believe by choosing for the system, for the dictatorial system, they can achieve it. But when we have a more compelling alternative and we're inclusive to them, we can actually not push them away and make them loyal to the dictator. We can actually push them to our side, and we can make them disloyal to the dictator. So more and more, I'm starting to think that it's important that we're open to NRM members. It's important that we're open to police and army, because we have to pull them to our side. And if we want to do it, we have to have a more interesting alternative. Something, it's also not too difficult to do, because the current system is very corrupt. It's violent. It's very divisive. It has this tribal element inside it. So if we have a more inspirational alternative government at the local issues, homegrown, then we can provide something very inspirational, I believe. The second part, the constitution, I think also a mistake that has been done in many revolutions in Africa is to look too much to the West, to the Western democracies, elections, and how they do it. But I believe we should look more to the ancient examples of African democracies. So we should read a lot about African history, and we have to find the democratic examples of homegrown African democracies, homegrown African visions and constitutions, because there's so much wisdom. Also the philosophy of Ubuntu in Africa. The West is not needed for inspiration. You can already find it in the ancient democracies that existed in Africa itself. So by just looking for these democratic examples of African nations or examples in history, we can be inspired by those and use them for our new constitutions or new visions. I remember that the constitution of Uganda was one of the most powerful, but just that it's being corrupted or ignored. But in essence, it was very powerful. So there's a lot of things we can use to go more deeply into this alternative government. But I think the essence is always to become more self-reliant and therefore become independent from the current system of dictatorship. Thank you.
I'll ask Mr. Iga to, I wanted to comment on that, but I'll comment later. Mr. Iga, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much to everyone. And it's good to see Eric physically back, although he has never left, as he has been on social media constantly tweeting and Facebooking. We welcome you again. Now, with regard to the alternative government, we've already, NUP has shown the leadership of how to organize things, have a system which works. And they've given an example of a working constitution, which can be followed, what we expect from our leaders. Yes, we should not, I think part of the problem we have in Uganda, maybe Africa, is calling MPs honorable, even when they have an Andy. Yeah? And this creates problem where some of the MPs think they are bigger than everyone. MK is not one of them. So that we will not worry about much. But I also think the constitution as it stands, yeah, we know it's not working. It could work, but it was just like the elections where it was M7 invention. So far, we know we should not be going to elections because he's laid it down that he's chosen who the commissioners are, and the new electoral commission boss is the same. So that gives us a way of saying we don't really want the 2026 elections with this current formation. That's the only input I can do at the moment, but I would like to thank our young leaders at the NUP. They've shown what can be done with the resources they have, and that's a good blueprint for a government. So we won't be starting from zero. I think they are working all the way down to grassroots. So if we get into, or they get into power, I think they'll do well. They can obviously follow the example of His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema of Zambia, what he's doing for that country. And I don't know if Eric has any comment of such example of leaders which our young leaders can follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Iga. I think we'll pick all the hands, and Eric, if you can note the questions. So then, you answer them, and then we conclude. The next one is Mr. Igesa Jackson. Can you please ask your question?
Oh, am I clear?
Yes.
Yes, I want to take this opportunity to first thank members for organizing this very meeting. And to me, this is a key area that we really needed to be able to go through, because in every organization, it is important for us to comprehend what organization is. That is what we do before we do what we want to do, so that when we do it, it always comes out very well. Now, institutions, organizations, or governments that never organize ahead, that never plan in terms of the organization structure and designs, end up finding a huge challenge. And yes, as the colleagues have already intimated, the issues of election, whether we are going for election or not, I think we needed to also ask ourselves a question about the previous elections. Did we win or we lost? If we won and we are not in the offices, what is the way forward? If we lost, what strategies are we coming up with? So as we discuss issues of organization and planning for that matter, it is very imperative that we learn from what the current government is doing, their loopholes or where they are failing from. Like, my view would be that a good or an ideal organization structure should be a place where ideas filter up as well as down, and where merit of ideas carries more weight than their source, and where participation and shared objectives are valued more than the source. I think this would be key issues, because as I did listen to Professor, he's intimating on very core issues. He is talking about the system that the current regime came with. Is it ready tape now? Or they are having a concept from bottom up? Now, all this would be good systems, provided we learn that the moment we begin bringing in people who are weak, we break our systems. Because if it be that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, that is the narrative I would be put on the table. So it goes that the organization will only be strong as it is weak contributors. Ladies and gentlemen, if we went on using meritocracy in a system that we are going to create, whereby people who are informed and knowledgeable head and are at the top of the helm, then it will mean that whatever we are doing will be able to always build a cohesion and have leadership that helps this institution or our nation. So issues of alternative government that the professor puts on table are very important. We can do them. We are, and indeed people are trying to do them. So as a colleague also intimated about a program where they're going in schools, we are also going to initiate debates in these institutions and create a plan where people will be able to share. I wanted again to say thank you, because the issues that bring down most governments are actually about organization structure and design. If we come up with an organization structure that does not fund strategy, then we shall be doing nothing. I thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Chechu omulimu ndooza muguulira omuzungu abyekwatiddemu agamba tewali kuleka Uganda kubonaabona, tewali kuleka bannayuganda kubonaabona nga wendi ndaba. Anaasalawo munywanyi waffe oyo ensonga zikwatemu, okwongera okuzuukusa bannayuganda, okwongera okubawa embavu, okwongera okubanyonyogera bave mu tulo twebalimu, sobola okugoba wano nakyemalira, sobola okutereeza ensi yaffe, sobola okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe, sobola okweyagalira mu Uganda eno kuba wano wewaffe, wano wetulina, situlinayo waka walala wano wewaffe, ate era tulina okukuumawo. Kati tulina okukola buli kimu ekigwanidde tujjeko nakyemalira gino Kaguta Museveni, sobola okulaba nga tufuna ensi ennungi, eggwanga eddungi, ffenna lye tuneeyagaliramu, abaana baffe bye baneeyagaliramu n'abazzukulu basobola okumanya nti wama twafuna ensi eddala egwanidde, twafuna Uganda ensi yaffe, twafuna abazadde baffe abaalwana olutalo olwakuba nakyemalira gino Kaguta Museveni. Kati obanga abazungu bavudde mu mirimu gyabwe naga bakikwatemu batukwatiremu bannayuganda batutaase. Kati gwe mwana wa Nambi oli kuki, gwe mwana we Bugisa oli kuki, gwe mwana we Bunyolo oli kuki, omwana we Fort, omwana we Mbalala, omwana we Malaba, omwana we Bwa, byonna gy'oli mu bitundu bya Uganda oli kuki? Tusitukiremu twetaaseeko ekinene kyawanga, so okutereeza ensi yaffe, so okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe. Mbaagala nnyo. Mukama Katonda asaba nkumire tujja kuba tuddamu. Buvunaanyizibwa bwaffe, buvunaanyizibwa bwaggwe n'oyo muwena abalaba okusobola okulaba nga tutambuza akatambi wano, okusobola okutambuza enjiri eno bannayuganda bategeere tulina omulimu gw'okukola. Ebintu si bya muzannyo, si bya mannyo we. Mukama bankumire bataayi mweraba.